Hey guys, tonight I'm taking you somewhere the history books often whisper about but rarely linger on. Forget knights in shining armor and ladies in silk gowns. Instead, imagine a small, dimly lit room above a noisy tavern, thick with the scent of cheap wine, candle smoke, and something warmer, human. This is where a medieval prostitute starts her day or night, depending on when the coin is likely to flow. The walls lean inward, the floor creaks like an old gossip, and every inch of the space seems to remember the weight of secrets it has held. Here, the business of pleasure is also the business of survival. Let me take you inside, slowly, the way a hand might trail along a wooden bedpost. There's no lace here, just coarse linen sheets, rumpled from the last paying visitor, and a small jug of watered wine on the table. Outside the single window, the street below is alive with the muddled sounds of medieval nightlife. Boots clapping over cobblestones, the faint bray of a donkey in the distance, and the occasional burst of laughter that's never quite as carefree as it sounds. Somewhere, a lute plays a lazy tune. Downstairs in the tavern, a barmaid shouts for more ale, and the smell of roasting meat drifts upward, mingling with sweat, perfume made from crushed herbs, and the faint tang of candle wax melting too close to the wick. Before we go further, if you enjoy these late-night wanderings into the hidden corners of history, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, and leave me a quick comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. It's a small thing, but it helps me keep taking you to places like this, where the past still hums under the skin. Now back to the room. The woman who works here isn't draped in luxury. Her dress is a faded red, the fabric rough against her skin. She wears it loose at the shoulders, not because it's fashionable, but because it's easier for her trade. Her hair smells faintly of lavender oil, though it's threaded with the scent of smoke from the tavern below. She's already been awake for hours, though it's not yet morning. Her nights often stretch until the first church bell of the day. The bed is both her stage and her battlefield, the place where she charms, listens, flatters, and sometimes fends off hands that think a coin buys more than it should. In the world outside, she is considered a necessary sin, tolerated but never truly welcomed. The church calls her a moral danger. The town watch pretends not to see her work as long as she stays in the quarter set aside for women like her. But in here, in this small room, she is in control, or at least as much as any woman of her trade can be in the 14th century. Her visitors range from lonely merchants with calloused hands and ale-warmed breath, to young apprentices who have never touched a woman before, to soldiers passing through with pay burning in their pockets. Each one comes looking for something: comfort,
distraction, release, and she has learned to read their needs as quickly as she can count their coins. Her life isn't a slow drip of romance. It's a careful balancing act, part performance, part negotiation, part silent endurance. Between visitors, she tends to her body like a craftsman to his tools, a rag dipped in rosewater, if she can afford it. Combing her hair while sitting cross-legged on the bed, checking the tiny purse hidden beneath the floorboard to make sure no one has taken what she's earned. She hears footsteps on the stairs, measured, purposeful. Another customer. She smooths her dress, tilts her head just so, and lets the candlelight soften her features. Because in this business, first impressions are worth almost as much as the coin. And in the dim room above the tavern, another night is only just beginning. The footsteps draw closer, slow enough to suggest the man is considering turning back, quick enough to tell her he probably will not. She has learned to read footsteps almost as well as she reads faces. A hesitant tread often means a shy customer, one who needs coaxing, a gentle voice, perhaps the pretense of innocence. Heavy and quick means drink and impatience, and she must be careful then, guiding the evening without letting it slip into danger. Tonight, the steps are steady, deliberate, the kind that say the man has made up his mind long before he reached the stairs. He appears in the doorway without knocking, as most of them do, a merchant by the look of his coat, travel dust still clinging to the hem, the faint smell of sea salt on his skin. He closes the door behind him, glancing around as though committing the room to memory. She knows the routine. He will sit, she will pour the wine, they will speak a little, or not at all. The night will unfold as it always does, a quiet transaction disguised in touches and murmured words. She moves easily, almost lazily, because the work requires that illusion of ease. No man wants to think he is being hurried, even if he is. When the door closes again and the merchant's boots fade down the stairwell, the room seems smaller somehow, the air thicker. She pulls the shutters half closed to block out the noise from the street. A few coins glint on the table, and she sweeps them into her palm, weighing them without looking. Enough for bread, a little meat, and if she is lucky, a scrap of cheese, tomorrow. She sets them in the purse under the floorboard, checks the latch, and sits for a moment, listening. It is quiet enough now that she can hear the creak of the tavern sign outside as it sways in the wind. Her body aches in ways she has long since stopped noticing, unless the pain is sharp enough to break through the habit of ignoring it. A twinge in her lower back, a dull soreness in her thighs, the constant tightness in her jaw from holding smiles longer than she feels them. She takes a sip from the wine jug, the sour taste filling her mouth. She swishes it around, swallows, and wonders how many more hours before the first light creeps over the rooftops and the church bells begin their call. Morning is no rest for her. It only means a quieter kind of work, one without an audience. By the time she unpins her hair, the next visitor arrives. This one younger, his face flushed from drink or nerves, she cannot tell which. He stumbles slightly as he comes in, and she steadies him with a hand on his arm, smiling in a way that is meant to ease rather than invite. These ones are not difficult, only inexperienced. They come seeking instruction as much as pleasure, and she gives them both because it is easier than letting them flounder and break the mood. When he leaves, he looks back at her in a way that suggests he will return. She knows he probably will not. In the stillness between customers, she stretches out on the bed, not to rest, but to ease the stiffness in her legs. Her eyes drift to the small wooden chest by the wall. Inside is a spare dress, cleaner than the one she wears, reserved for when the church inspectors walk the quarter. They do not come often, but when they do, the women know to look modest, to speak little, to keep their rooms neat. The church pretends to disapprove of their trade while quietly tolerating it, as long as it stays out of sight of the righteous. She wonders, not for the first time, how many of the men who visit her also kneel in the cathedral on Sundays, heads bowed, voices low in prayer. The night carries on, measured by the guttering of the candles and the dull ache in her limbs. Somewhere outside, a fight breaks out. The sound of shouting, a crash of wood against stone, then hurried footsteps. She stays still, listening until the noise fades. The city never truly sleeps, but there are hours when it pretends to, when even the drunks stagger home and the watchmen pace more slowly. Those are the hours she likes best, when the street below grows quiet and the only sounds in her room are the faint scratch of a mouse in the wall and the slow, steady beat of her own breathing. She closes her eyes for a moment, but there is no drifting into dreams yet. The night is not over, and until the first light touches the rooftops, she will be here, in this room above the tavern, waiting for the next set of footsteps to climb the stairs. The first hint of daylight creeps into the room like an unwelcome guest, soft at first, then sharper as the pale sun pushes through the shutters. She has not slept. A few hours of stillness perhaps, but not real sleep. Just that half-conscious drifting where the body rests while the mind keeps watch. Her dress is wrinkled, her hair still smelling faintly of smoke from the tavern below. She sits on the edge of the bed, feeling the wooden frame tilt under her weight, and rubs her eyes with the back of her hand. The world outside is changing. The street sounds are different now. The rattle of a cart being pushed over cobblestones, the thin cry of a bread seller already calling. To the early risers, the slow toll of the church bell marking the start of the working day. She pulls herself up and goes to the small basin in the corner. The water is cold, taken from the well yesterday, and now holding a faint metallic taste on the air. She splashes some on her face, flinching at the shock, and wipes herself with the corner of a linen cloth that has been washed so many times its threads have started to fray. This is as close to a morning wash as she will get. Baths are for the rich or for festival days, and she cannot spare the time or the coin for such indulgence. She glances at her hands, turning them over in the thin light. The nails are kept short, not for beauty, but because long ones would break or scratch, and scratches can bring questions from the wrong kind of customer. From below, the muffled voices of the tavern keepers drift up, the heavy clink of jugs being stacked, the scrape of chairs across the floor. The night crowd is gone, replaced by workers who will eat a quick meal before heading to the fields or the market. She moves quietly around the room, straightening the sheets, tucking away the coin purse again, making sure nothing of value is left where wandering hands might find it. The room smells faintly of candle wax and stale wine. She opens the shutters for a moment to let in the morning air, though it carries with it the smell of the street, damp stone, horse manure, and the faint, sharp tang of the tanner's workshop a few buildings away. When she finally steps outside, the light stings her eyes for a moment. The street is narrow here, the buildings leaning in as though conspiring against the open sky. Women with baskets move past her without meeting her gaze. She is not invisible, but she is not welcome either. Children weave between the legs of passers-by, chasing one another and shouting until a mother's voice calls them back. Somewhere nearby, a man haggles loudly with a fish seller, his voice rising over the splash of water as the fish are laid out on the stall. She pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders and makes her way toward the baker's, the coin in her hand warm from her palm. The baker's shop is a small, low-ceilinged space, the air heavy with the smell of fresh bread. She waits her turn, listening to the chatter of the other women, most of whom keep their voices low when they notice her. She is used to it. Some of them have husbands who have sat on her bed. She pays for a small loaf, the crust already cooling, and steps back into the street. The bread is for her breakfast, though she will eat it slowly, stretching it across the day. Food is not something to be taken for granted in this part of the city. Back at her room, she tears off a piece of bread and eats it standing by the window watching the street below. The sun is higher now and the noise has grown. Merchants set up their stalls, calling out their goods in voices trained to carry over the hum of the crowd. Somewhere, a dog barks and the sound of a blacksmith's hammer rings out in steady rhythm. Life moves on outside while she stays in her room, waiting for night to fall again. Daytime is not her time, yet it is part of the same life, filled with its own quiet work. Repairs to her dress, tending to her hair, keeping her small space in order. She checks her coins again, counting them without thinking, and then sits for a while, letting the morning pass like water slipping past a stone. It will not be long before the sun begins its slow slide downward, and the shadows grow across the narrow streets. That is when her true work begins again, when the steady tread of footsteps will once more climb the stairs to her door. For now, she waits, watching the city breathe around her, knowing it will all start again before the candles are lit. By mid-afternoon, the light through her shutters turns softer, the dust in the air catching it in slow spirals. She sits at the table, her elbows resting on the worn wood, the bread from the morning nearly gone. This is the quiet part of the day, when her mind drifts to the rules she has learned, not from any book or preacher, but from years of survival in this trade. They are rules never spoken aloud, yet they bind every woman in her position as tightly as any chain. The first is to keep the regulars. A man who returns again and again is worth more than one who throws down too many coins in a single night. Regulars mean predictable income, and predictable income means she can plan for the weeks when the city empties for harvest, or when the winter cold keeps men at home with their wives. The second is to avoid the wrong attention. She knows the watchmen who patrol the streets and keeps her manner civil when they pass. Some will look the other way if a customer gets loud or refuses to pay, but others are less kind, using their authority to take what they want without coin or courtesy. The third rule is to listen more than she speaks. Men talk in her room more than they do anywhere else. They boast about their earnings, their trades, their travels, and sometimes their crimes. She files away the useful details, never knowing when a name or a rumor might serve as a shield against trouble. A woman in her trade lives with constant risk, not just from disease or violence, but from being caught in the wrong conversation. A careless word can turn into an accusation of theft or deceit, and such accusations rarely end in her favor. When the sun begins to sink and the shadows of the buildings stretch long over the street, she moves to the basin again. The water is not fresh, but she pours a little lavender oil into it, the scent rising faintly as she rinses her face and arms. She changes into her cleaner dress, smoothing the fabric over her hips. Her hair is brushed out until it shines in the candlelight, though she knows it will soon smell of wine and smoke again. Presentation matters. A man who believes he is stepping into a space of care will pay more readily and stay more willingly. Outside, the tavern begins to fill. She hears the voices first, growing in volume and warmth as the ale flows. Laughter rises and falls, the occasional clatter of a dropped mug punctuating the hum of conversation. She knows that some of those voices will find their way upstairs before the night is done. The tavern keeper gives her a nod as she passes through, a silent agreement between them. He does not ask for a share of her earnings, but she knows he benefits from the extra drinks sold to men who linger for her company. By the time she is back in her room, the street outside is darker, the lamplighters moving along with their poles, coaxing small flames to life. The first customer tonight is one she has seen before, a soldier with a rough beard and hands that tremble slightly from drink. She lets him speak, listening without comment, as he tells her about a skirmish on the edge of the city, about friends lost and wounds healed badly. He pays her before he leaves, leaving behind the faint smell of leather and smoke. She places the coins in her purse, the sound of them soft and familiar. As the night deepens, she thinks of the women who work in other parts of the city. Some stay in brothels run by widows or old women who once did the work themselves. Others take customers in alleyways or behind taverns, risking the cold and the dangers of the street for faster coin. Her room is small and her trade is no less dangerous. but at least she has walls around her and a lock on the door. Still, she knows the walls are not enough if a man decides to ignore them. She sleeps with a small knife under her mattress, more for comfort than confidence. When she hears the next knock at her door, it is soft, almost polite. She pauses for a moment before answering, aware that each knock brings both possibility and risk. The candlelight flickers as she crosses the room, her hand brushing the edge of the bed as if to remind herself that this is her space, however small. She opens the door with a practiced smile, ready once again to navigate the fine line between welcome and caution. The man standing in her doorway is not one she has seen before. His clothes are not ragged, but they are plain enough to mark him as neither soldier nor merchant. His hair is damp, clinging to his temples, and there is a faint smell of rain about him, even though the street below is dry. He steps inside without waiting for her invitation, but his movements are not rough or hurried. She watches him carefully, noting the way his eyes travel over the room, pausing briefly on the basin, the bed, and finally on her face. There is something about the way he looks at her that is different from the usual appraisal, less of the hungry glance and more of a measuring one, as if he is deciding what kind of woman she might be before he speaks. She closes the door and waits, giving him the space to begin. Sometimes a man will reveal his nature in the first few words, and she has learned to listen for it. He asks for wine, his voice steady, and she pours it into a cup, passing it to him without comment. He drinks slowly, watching her over the rim. There is no smile in his eyes, no warmth, but also no open threat. It unsettles her more than either would. She asks him what brings him to her room, and he sets the cup down before answering that he has been told she is discreet. Discreet can mean many things in her trade. It can mean that she will not speak of a man's visit to others. It can mean she will not ask about the bruises on his arms or the dagger at his belt. It can also mean that she is willing to pretend to be someone else, to play a role for the sake of his desire. She studies him, weighing the risk of asking too much against the danger of knowing too little. Instead of pressing, she lets him speak. He talks little, only enough to say he has been traveling and will not stay in the city long. She nods at the right moments, letting him see that she is listening without showing too much interest. Men who guard their stories often do so because the truth would not be safe to share. When he finally reaches for her, his hands are careful, almost tentative, as if he is unsure whether to trust her with his presence. It is a strange thing, but she responds in kind, moving with the same measured pace until the tension between them eases. When it is done, he dresses without hurry. She notices that he leaves more coin than is needed, slipping it onto the table without looking at her. Before he goes, he pauses at the door and says that if anyone asks, she has not seen him. Then he steps out into the stairwell, his boots fading into the noise from the tavern below. She stands for a long moment staring at the door after it closes, the coins still untouched on the table. Something about him lingers in the air, an unease that sits low in her chest. She is not used to customers who leave questions behind. Most are forgettable within an hour, their names, faces, and words dissolving into the sameness of the trade. This one feels different. She moves to the window and pushes the shutter open just enough to see the street. She catches a glimpse of him turning the corner, his head bent slightly, as if avoiding recognition. The noise from the tavern draws her back. More customers will come, and she cannot afford to dwell too long on one man. Yet as the evening wears on and the candles burn lower, she finds her thoughts returning to him. She wonders who he is hiding from and why he would choose her room as the place to leave his trail in silence. She knows enough of the city's undercurrents to suspect that his presence might pull trouble toward her if she is not careful. Still, the night moves forward, each knock on the door bringing her back to the rhythm of her work. By the time the last visitor leaves and she is alone again, the street outside is nearly silent, the air heavy with the smell of smoke from the dying fires in the hearth below. She lies down on the bed, but sleep is slow to come. In the darkness, she can still see the damp-haired stranger in her mind, the weight of his gaze, and the quiet warning in his parting words. The morning comes with a heaviness that feels different from the usual weariness of her trade. It is the kind of weight that clings to the mind as much as the body. She sits up slowly, the air in the room still cool from the night, and listens to the faint stirrings of the street below. Somewhere, a cart rattles past, its wooden wheels echoing between the close walls of the buildings. The baker's voice calls out, sharp and familiar, but she does not feel the usual pull to join the early crowd for bread. Instead, she stays by the window, her eyes drifting toward the corner where she last saw the man disappear. The memory of him lingers. His quiet, deliberate way of speaking, the damp smell of rain that clung to him, the coins left without negotiation. She turns the small purse in her hands, the extra weight reminding her that his visit was no dream. It should be a comfort. Extra coin means food, warmth, security. But today it feels like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples she cannot yet see the edges of. She tells herself she has had strange customers before, men who left her unsettled, and nothing came of it. But the thought does not stay. By midday, she forces herself outside. The streets are brighter now, the market stalls already buzzing with the voices of traders and customers. She keeps her head low, moving through the crowd with the ease of someone who knows how to be present without being noticed. A fish seller calls out, waving a hand over his fresh catch, the smell of salt and scales clinging to the air. She moves past, heading toward the baker. The line is shorter than usual, but she still feels the eyes of two women ahead of her, their conversation dropping to a murmur when she steps behind them. This is not new. Her trade makes her an object of curiosity and judgment in equal measure. But today, with the memory of the man's parting words, she feels every glance more sharply. When she returns to her room, she notices it almost immediately. The door is shut as she left it, but the air inside feels disturbed, as though someone had walked through and left without touching anything. She checks the floorboard where she keeps her coins, finding them all still there, and yet the sense of intrusion does not leave her. She moves through the space slowly, touching the basin, the table, the bed frame, as if to confirm that everything is in its place. She tries to tell herself it is nothing more than her own unease playing tricks, but she finds herself glancing toward the door more than once. As evening approaches, she lights a single candle, letting the glow pool softly across the table. The tavern below begins to fill, the familiar hum of voices rising with the smell of ale and roasting meat. She sits by the bed, brushing out her hair, each stroke of the comb slow and deliberate. Her mind wanders to the possibility that the man's presence in her room might have been seen by someone who was not meant to see it. She thinks of the way he looked over his shoulder when he left, the quiet warning he gave her, and wonders if it was meant to keep her safe or simply to serve his own escape. The first customer of the night is a regular, a man whose visits are brief and predictable. He talks little, pays fairly, and leaves without lingering. She finds herself grateful for the familiarity, for the way his presence fits into the expected pattern of her life. When he leaves, she closes the door behind him and leans against it for a moment, the wood cool against her back. She listens for footsteps in the hall, for the sound of anyone moving toward her door, but the building is quiet except for the muffled laughter from below. Later, when the street outside grows dark, she goes to the window again. The lamplighters have been by, their small flames flickering in the evening breeze. She scans the narrow stretch of road, watching the shadows shift, half expecting to see the damp-haired man reappear. He does not, but she notices two figures standing at the far end, their shapes indistinct in the dim light. They are not moving, not speaking, just standing. It could be nothing. It could be everything. She steps back from the window, the candlelight flickering across her face, and tells herself that the city is full of watchers, that not all of them are watching her. Still, when she lies down later, the unease is there, curling into the quiet of the room. The man's words echo faintly in her thoughts. If anyone asks, you have not seen me. She closes her eyes, but her rest is light, each small sound pulling her back to the edge of wakefulness, as if she is waiting for the knock that will come sooner or later. The morning feels different before she has even opened the shutters. There is a heaviness to the air, as though the city itself has drawn in a slow breath and is holding it. She sits on the edge of her bed, listening to the sounds outside. They are the usual noises of the waking street, the rattle of a cart, the clatter of pails being carried, the faint voice of a woman calling to someone across the way. Yet there is a sharpness under it, as if each sound lands closer than it should. She waits before pulling back the shutters, taking the time to smooth her hair and wrap her shawl tightly, not out of modesty, but because it feels like armor. When she finally opens the window, the light spills in too bright for her tired eyes. She scans the street without appearing to do so, letting her gaze drift from the baker's doorway to the corner where the road bends out of sight. There are faces she knows, neighbors she barely speaks to, and the usual mix of passers-by on their way to the market. Then she notices him, a man she does not recognize, standing near the wall of the tannery, his back against the stone, arms folded. He's not looking at her, at least not openly, but he has been there too long to be part of the morning flow. She closes the shutters again, leaving a narrow gap to watch through. The man stays in place for several minutes, then moves slowly down the street, disappearing into the crowd. It could mean nothing. People loiter all the time, waiting for someone or simply resting. But after the visit from the two men in the night, every unfamiliar face feels like a shadow that might lengthen toward her. She steps away from the window and busies herself with small tasks, wiping the table, straightening the bed, checking the purse under the floorboard. By midday, she forces herself outside. The market is alive with color and noise, the smell of fresh bread mingling with the sharper tang of onions and dried fish. She buys a small loaf and a few wilted greens, keeping her eyes open for any sign of the two men from last night. She does not see them, but she does catch the same man from the morning at the far edge of the square, speaking to a vendor with one hand resting on the table. His body is turned just enough that she cannot see his face clearly, yet something about his posture tells her he is aware of her presence. She turns away before their eyes can meet. Back in her room, the bread on the table, she feels the walls more keenly than usual. The space that has so often been a refuge now feels close and airless. She tries to distract herself by mending a small tear in her dress, the needle moving in and out of the fabric with mechanical precision, but her thoughts keep drifting to the man, to the possibility that she is not simply being watched, but weighed. If the stranger from 2 nights ago is in trouble, She wonders whether it is the sort that will spill over onto anyone who crossed his path. The tavern below begins to stir earlier than usual, voices rising in uneven bursts as the first drinkers take their seats. She hears the scrape of chairs, the muffled thump of boots on wood, the familiar clink of mugs being filled. The sound is oddly comforting, a reminder of the routine she has kept for years. She considers the night ahead. Customers will come, some familiar, some new, and she will meet them as she always has, with the careful blend of warmth and caution that keeps her work from tipping into danger. Yet now there is a new layer to that caution, one that listens for every footstep on the stairs, ready to measure whether it belongs to a customer or to someone with other questions. As dusk settles, she lights the candle and sits by the window, the shutters closed but not latched. She tells herself she will watch only for a moment, but she stays there, listening to the shifting patterns of sound outside, watching for any figure that pauses too long in the flow of the street. She sees movement at the far corner, but by the time her eyes adjust, the figure has slipped away. When the first knock of the evening comes, it is the brisk, almost cheerful rap of a regular customer. She exhales, more relief in it than she intended, and opens the door with a smile that feels heavier to hold than it once did. The regular leaves earlier than usual, his footsteps quick and light as he goes down the stairs. She hears his voice blend into the tavern noise below, exchanging a few words with the keeper before fading into the street. She closes the door behind him and sits for a moment on the edge of the bed, letting the silence settle. The candle flickers, throwing a restless shadow across the far wall. It has been a long day of keeping her eyes open, and she feels the weight of it in her neck and shoulders. Still, there is something about the sounds from below tonight that keeps her from retreating entirely into her room. The tavern is busier than usual for this early hour. She can tell from the way the voices rise and overlap, from the occasional burst of laughter followed by a hush, as if someone has remembered to keep a secret. She wraps her shawl around her and slips quietly down the stairs, pausing just before the doorway to the main room. She stands where she can see without being seen, letting the shadows near the wall hold her. The light from the hearth paints the faces of the drinkers in warm, uneven color. At first, she notices nothing unusual. Men talk of trade, of weather, of the small grievances of their work. But then she catches it, a name she does not recognize, spoken with the kind of weight that makes her listen closer. The voice is low, belonging to a man hunched over his mug near the back corner. Another man leans in toward him, his hand cupped loosely around the side of his face as though to shield the words from the air. She cannot make out every detail, but the fragments she catches are enough to make her heart slow and heavy. They are speaking of someone who has passed through the city in the last 2 days, a man traveling under a false name, avoiding the main roads, paying in coin that does not match the place he claims to be from. One of them says he was seen near the harbor. Another swears he heard from a watchman that the man visited this part of the quarter before disappearing again. Her stomach tightens. She does not need them to describe his hair or his eyes to know they are speaking of the stranger who came to her room. She steps back into the darker part of the stairwell before either man can look her way. The air feels closer here, the smell of ale and roasting meat wrapping around her like a heavy cloth. She waits until their conversation shifts to something lighter, then retreats up the stairs without letting her footsteps carry. In her room again, she closes the door and leans against it, the faint hum of the tavern still reaching her ears. She does not know if the men are simply gossiping, passing along rumors for the sake of having something to say, or if they are part of the same search as the two who came knocking last night. The thought that the man from her room may have been near the harbour troubles her more than she expected. The harbour is where ships arrive quietly in the night, where goods not meant for the market are unloaded before dawn. It is a place for merchants with too much to hide and sailors who owe more than they can pay. If he has been there, it means his troubles are not the kind that vanish with a quick bribe or a change of clothes. She moves to the window and opens the shutters a fraction. The street is quieter now, the lamplight catching on the edges of the cobblestones. She sees no one standing watch, no figure lingering in the shadows, but the stillness feels like a cover rather than a truth. She closes the shutters again, her fingers resting on the latch longer than needed. The extra coin he left her is still under the floorboard, untouched, yet it feels heavier each time she remembers it. Money is supposed to bring comfort, but this feels like something else entirely, a weight that pulls her into a story she has not agreed to be part of. The night goes on, the candle burning lower, but she does not call for customers. Instead, she stays by the table, listening to the way the tavern below slowly empties. The conversation she overheard has taken root in her mind, each fragment growing into questions she cannot yet answer. By the time the last voice fades and the door to the tavern closes for the night, she knows that whatever the man's business in the city was, it has already begun to leave traces in her own life. It is still early in the morning when the knock comes, sharp and purposeful, the kind that does not belong to a customer. She has not yet lit the candle. The room is grey with the first light seeping through the shutters, and the street sounds are only beginning to rise. For a moment she thinks of ignoring it, of staying silent until the footsteps retreat. But the knock comes again, firmer this time, and she knows whoever is on the other side will not go away so easily. She opens the door just enough to see the man standing there. He is not one of the two who came before, nor the loiterer she spotted near the tannery. He is older, his hair streaked with grey, his face lined not only from age, but from long years of watching and weighing others. His clothes are plain but clean, and though he carries no visible weapon, there is a stiffness in the way he stands that tells her he does not need one to get what he wants. He greets her by name, the false one she gives to customers, but his tone makes it clear he knows it is not her only name. She hesitates, then opens the door wider, though not enough for him to step inside. He does not ask to enter, only fixes her with a steady look and says he has questions. She tells him she is not in the habit of answering questions for strangers. He smiles, but there is no warmth in it. He says he is not a stranger to this part of the city, and certainly not to her trade. He also says he has reason to believe a certain man visited her room 2 nights ago, a man who is now being sought for matters that do not concern the tavern or its usual business. Her first instinct is to deny it outright, but she knows better than to rush her words. Instead, she tilts her head and asks why he thinks the man would come to her. The smile lingers on his face, but his eyes sharpen. He tells her there are people who saw him come up these stairs. He says no one saw him leave, which he finds interesting. She shrugs, says men come and go here all night, and she does not keep track of where they go after. He watches her for a long moment, and she forces herself to meet his gaze without flinching. Finally, he says he does not care what business passed between them. What matters is whether she told him anything or whether he told her anything in return. She says nothing. It is not a refusal, just silence, and in that space he seems to decide he will get no more from her today. Before he leaves, he tells her to remember that some questions are easier to answer early, before others start asking them in less friendly ways. Then he steps back into the hallway, his boots steady on the stairs as he descends. She closes the door and leans against it, letting out a breath she did not realize she was holding. Her mind runs through the conversation, each word weighed for what it might reveal. The man's visit is more troubling than the two who came before. The others felt like searchers looking for a direction to follow. This one felt like someone already close to knowing, someone who could afford to wait for the last pieces to fall into place. She spends the rest of the morning in restless motion, moving from the window to the table, to the bed, without settling. She thinks of the stranger's quiet warning again, wondering whether he meant to protect her or simply to keep her out of his path. Either way, she is in it now. The visits, the watchers, the overheard talk in the tavern, they are threads tightening around her, and she does not yet know which will pull hardest. By midday, she forces herself outside, if only to shake the sense of being closed in. The market is loud, the sun catching on the bright cloth of the stalls, but even in the crowd, she feels eyes on her. She cannot be sure whether they are real or born of her own unease, yet she keeps moving, never lingering in one place too long. When she returns, the street outside the tavern is quiet again, and the narrow hallway up to her room feels narrower than ever. She knows the older man will return. People like him do not ask questions once and walk away. The only question is whether he will come back alone, or whether the next knock on her door will bring someone less patient. That night, the tavern feels different. It is not just the customers, though there are fewer of them, and those who do come seem quicker to drink, slower to speak. It is the way the air sits heavier in the room, the way every voice carries as if the walls have drawn closer. She sits on the edge of her bed, listening to the rise and fall of conversation from below, trying to decide whether to work as usual or let the night pass in quiet. Her purse is not full enough to afford many nights without earnings, but the thought of opening her door to the wrong man keeps her still. The older man's visit has left her uneasy in a way she cannot shake. His words keep replaying, each one pressed into her mind with the weight of a promise. Easier to answer now than later, he had said. She knows what later means in this part of the city. Later means no candlelit questions at her doorway. Later means narrow alleys and hands that don't bother knocking. The thought settles in her stomach like something too heavy to swallow. She tries to imagine leaving. There are other taverns, other rooms to rent, other parts of the city where her face is unknown. She has done it before, though not in many years. The trouble is that leaving now would be like walking through the market in broad daylight with a sign around her neck saying she has something to hide. She pictures the older man watching the doorway from some shadow she cannot see, waiting for her to make the first move. If he suspects her of knowing more than she claims, disappearing will only confirm it. Her mind drifts to the stranger again, the way he had stood in her doorway, as if he already knew how the room would feel before stepping inside. He had left behind more coin than she expected, and now she wonders if that was payment or warning. She wishes she had asked him what he was running from, though she knows he would not have told her. Men like that carry their secrets tightly, but they still leave them behind like fingerprints in the places they touch. The hours stretch on. A knock comes just after midnight, but it is the familiar rhythm of a regular who lives nearby. She lets him in, and the transaction is brief, almost silent. When he leaves, she feels no safer than before. The quiet that follows is the kind that makes her ears strain for sounds that are not there. The building creaks under the shifting weight of the night air. and each groan of the wood feels like footsteps in the hall. By the time the first hint of dawn begins to pale the edges of the shutters, she has made no decision. She tells herself she will wait one more day, though she does not quite believe it. Sleep comes in short bursts, broken by the clatter of carts in the street and the distant call of a bell somewhere near the river. When she finally rises, the air in the room feels close and stale. She opens the shutters to let in the morning, leaning her elbows on the sill as she scans the street below. For a while, nothing catches her eye. Then she sees him. The loiterer from before, the one who had stood near the tannery wall, is now at the far end of the street, leaning against a cart as if in casual rest. His gaze is not on her window, but there is no mistaking the weight of his presence. He is not here by chance. She pulls back from the window, her pulse quickening. If they are watching her, it means they are waiting for something, perhaps for her to slip, perhaps for the stranger to return. She knows then that staying or leaving is no longer just a question of safety, it is a question of control. If she leaves now, she does it on her own terms. If she stays, she risks the moment when the choice will be taken from her entirely. The day moves slowly after that. She eats the last of the bread, mends the hem of her dress, and keeps her ear tuned to the sounds outside. Every creak of the stairs makes her pause, every voice in the hall draws her closer to the door. By evening, she is no closer to deciding, yet the feeling in her chest has shifted from unease to something sharper. She knows she cannot keep living in the shadow of someone else's trouble without being pulled into it herself. When night falls, she lights the candle and sits at the table, the small purse of coins beside her. She counts them slowly, not just to know how much she has, but to feel the weight of what leaving would mean. Each coin is a step toward another room, another street, another life where her name is not spoken by strangers in the dark. The question is whether she will take that step before the next knock comes. The knock comes long after the tavern has gone quiet, so late that the candle on her table has burned down to a shallow pool of wax. She had been sitting with her chin in her hand, watching the flame tilt and recover with each faint draught that slipped under the door. The sound of it jolts her upright, not because it is loud, but because it is soft, measured, and entirely out of place in the dead hour before dawn. No one knocks at this time unless it is for something they do not want the rest of the building to hear. For a long moment she does not move. Her eyes rest on the door, her breath shallow, her ears straining for any sound beyond the wood. The knock comes again, just as slow, just as deliberate, and she feels the hairs rise along her arms. Whoever it is, they are not going to leave without being answered. She glances toward the floorboard where the coins are hidden, then at the small knife beneath her mattress. She steps to the door, pressing her palm against it without opening it, and asks who is there. The voice that answers is low, almost conversational, but there is an edge beneath it that she recognizes instantly. It is the older man from 2 mornings ago. He says her name, not the name she uses for customers, but the one he had spoken before, and asks if he might come in. She tells him it is not a good time, but his answer is quiet and steady. Some matters cannot wait for the right time. Her fingers hover over the latch. She knows if she refuses, he may simply force the door, and the noise would bring more trouble than she is willing to risk. She opens it, a fraction, enough to see his face in the dim hallway light. He looks the same as before, calm and deliberate, but his eyes are sharper now, more certain. Without waiting for her to invite him, he pushes the door wider and steps inside, closing it softly behind him. He does not sit. Instead, he stands in the center of the room, his gaze drifting briefly over the bed, the table, the shuttered window, before coming back to her. He says he will not waste time. The man they are looking for is dangerous, more dangerous than she understands, and he is certain now that the stranger came to her. He wants to know what the man said, where he went, and whether she has seen him since. She tells him again that she does not know. Her voice is steady, but she can feel her pulse in her throat. He steps closer, not enough to touch her, but enough that the space between them feels too small. He says he believes she is a careful woman, that she knows when to speak and when to hold her tongue, but that this is one of those moments when silence will not serve her. His tone is not a threat, but there is a heaviness in it, a quiet promise of consequences if she refuses. For a moment she considers telling him something, not the truth, but enough to send him in another direction. But lies, once given, can be tested, and she does not know what he already has in his grasp. Instead, she keeps her eyes on his and says nothing. The silence stretches between them until the sound of a chair scraping in the tavern below breaks it. He glances toward the door, then back at her, and for the first time she sees a flicker of something in his expression. Frustration, perhaps, or the smallest trace of doubt. He steps back toward the door, his hand resting briefly on the latch. He tells her that others will come, and they will not ask as politely as he has. Then he opens the door and slips out into the hall, his footsteps fading into the dark. She closes it behind him, leaning her forehead against the wood. Her heart is still racing, not from fear exactly, but from the knowledge that whatever game she has been drawn into is moving faster than she can see. The candle sputters and dies, leaving her in the dark. She moves to the bed and sits, the coins still hidden under the floorboard, the knife within reach. She knows now that leaving will not free her from this. Wherever she goes, the shadow of that man's visit will follow until the one who is looking for him decides they have wrung her dry of whatever they believe she knows. And if they are right about his danger, then it is not only her freedom at stake, but perhaps her life. The night drags toward morning, each moment thick with the thought that the next knock might not come from a hand at all, but from something heavier breaking its way through her door. Morning comes slowly, with a dim and colorless light that seeps through the shutters like water through old cloth. She has not slept, not really, only drifted in and out of shallow half-dreams where the knock on her door repeats endlessly, always just loud enough to wake her. The street below is quieter than usual for this hour. The usual calls from the baker are missing, replaced by the slow creak of a cart moving at a measured pace, the driver not bothering to urge the horse forward. She sits at the table, the knife still within reach, the candle stub from the night before pushed to the side. Her thoughts turn over in circles, always returning to the older man's warning that others will come. She wonders if one of them will be the damp-haired stranger himself, though she doubts he would risk walking openly into the place where he was last seen. Yet there is a part of her that still listens for his knock, not out of any fondness, but because it would mean that this story, whatever it is, might have an end she can see. By midday, she forces herself downstairs. The tavern is nearly empty, the smell of stale ale and smoke hanging in the air. The keeper stands behind the counter, polishing a mug with a cloth that has seen better days. He glances at her, his brow lifting slightly, then lowers his voice as she approaches. He tells her that a watchman came by earlier, not looking for her, but asking questions about the quarter. The kind of questions that circle closer to her part of the street without landing directly on it. She asks him what sort of questions, and he leans in as if the walls have ears. The watchman was asking about a man who is said to have killed someone of importance in another city. Not a brawl in a tavern, not the stabbing of a thief in an alley, but the kind of killing that draws the attention of men with seals and titles. The stranger's description matched well enough that the watchman's questions left no doubt about who he was hunting. She stands still for a moment, the words settling like grit in her mouth. A killing like that is not the work of a man desperate for coin or caught in sudden anger. It is the work of someone either very sure or very desperate. She asks the keeper if the watchman said who the victim was, but he shakes his head. All he knows is that the man they are chasing is said to have left the body in a way that made certain no one could mistake it for an accident. The keeper tells her to be careful, his tone carrying the weight of someone who has seen trouble arrive quietly and stay longer than anyone expects. She thanks him and returns to her room, her mind turning over what she has learned. If the stranger truly killed someone of importance, then the men who seek him are not merely chasing justice. They are carrying out orders, and orders like that do not fade with time. She closes the shutters and sits on the bed, her hands resting on her knees. She tries to remember every detail of his visit, the way he looked around the room before speaking, the careful manner in which he moved, the absence of any nervousness in his voice. If he had killed someone, he carried it, without the weight most men would show. That, more than the act itself, makes her uneasy. A man who can take a life and then sit quietly in a stranger's room, drinking wine without haste, is not a man bound by the same rules as others. The day drags toward evening, the light outside thinning into the soft gold that marks the start of another night. She lights the candle early, not because she expects visitors, but because she wants the comfort of its glow. The street below grows busier, the voices rising as people return from the market. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, its sound carried on the wind. She thinks again of leaving, but the idea feels thinner now, less like a plan and more like a wish. Wherever she goes, the questions will follow until someone believes they have wrung the truth from her. And if the truth is that she has nothing to give them, she doubts it will be enough to satisfy men who work on orders instead of evidence. As the first knock of the night comes light and familiar, she finds herself wishing it were the stranger after all. At least then she could ask him whether the blood on his hands belongs to the kind of man who deserved it, or the kind who will send others to burn a city just to avenge him. The knock comes just before dawn, sharp enough to make her drop the piece of bread she had been eating. It is not his knock. This one is harder, quicker, the kind that expects an answer without delay. She sets the bread aside, wipes her hands on her skirt, and stands still for a moment, listening to the faint hiss of wind outside the shutters. Whoever it is has no patience for silence. The second knock follows immediately, louder this time, almost a fist pounding. She moves to the door, her bare feet whispering across the boards, and rests her hand on the latch without lifting it. "Who is it?" she asks, her voice low, wary. "It's Martin," comes the reply, and the name makes her hesitate. Martin is a sailor who spends his nights between the harbour and the tavern, always with news, though his news is often tangled with rumour. She opens the door a little, just enough to see his weather-creased face. He smells of brine and stale ale, his hair windblown from the early morning air. "I shouldn't be here," he says without waiting for her to speak. "But I've heard something you'll want to know." His voice is low but urgent, and his eyes flick once toward the stairs, as if expecting someone to appear. She lets him inside, closing the door quickly behind them. He stays near the doorway, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "There's talk down by the harbour," he begins. They've found him, or think they have. A man matching his description boarded a small boat last night, heading upriver. But here's the part that matters. The men looking for him aren't just watchmen anymore. There's a bounty now, and it's more than most folks in this city will see in a year. The words,
land heavy between them. A bounty means the search will no longer be confined to those with orders. It means every man and woman desperate for coin will be watching, listening, ready to hand over a name or a direction. She feels the skin at the back of her neck prickle. Martin lowers his voice further. They're saying anyone who's helped him will be dealt with the same way. No trials, just quick and quiet. He pauses, his gaze sharpening. If he came to you, if he left anything behind, you need to think about where that leaves you. She says nothing, her face still, though inside her, thoughts are tumbling. She pictures the note beneath the floorboard, the purse of coins beside it, the simple fact that both could be found if someone decided to search. She wonders how long it would take for suspicion to turn into proof in the minds of those willing to profit from her downfall. Martin steps closer, lowering his voice again. I've known you a long time. I don't care what business you had with him, but if they come for you, I can't stop them. None of us can. His eyes search hers for a moment, as if weighing whether she already knows what she's going to do. She thanks him quietly, and he nods, stepping back to the door. I'll say I didn't see you this morning, he murmurs, before slipping into the hallway and down the stairs. Alone again, she leans against the door, the wood cool beneath her shoulder. The room feels smaller, as if the walls have drawn in by a hand she cannot see. A bounty changes everything. It means she is no longer just avoiding the attention of a few determined men. It means she is surrounded by hundreds of potential hunters. Any one of them might knock, not for her trade, but for the promise of silver. She crosses to the table and sits, her eyes drifting to the floorboard where the coin and the note lie hidden. Leaving now would mean abandoning both, but taking them could mean being caught with the very proof that ties her to him. Staying might be worse still. The thought of waiting here for the wrong knock, the wrong face, makes her stomach tighten. By the time the first pale light of morning reaches the shutters, she has begun to think the choice has been made for her. If she remains, the city will close in around her, each street a trap waiting to spring. If she leaves, she might slip between its fingers, at least long enough to put distance between herself and the shadow of the man who came to her door. Yet even as she starts to plan her escape, there is a part of her that hesitates, the part that wonders whether leaving now will mean never knowing the truth of why he came and what he has set in motion, and whether, in some quiet corner of the city, he is waiting for her to keep the promise she never agreed to make. She waits until the tavern is almost empty before making her first move. The night has been slow, the air heavy with the promise of rain, and most customers left early. The difficulty with that suits her. She does not want eyes on her when she slips away. The candle on her table burns low, and she lets it die rather than waste time trimming it. Her things are few: 2 dresses, a pair of worn shoes, a small comb of polished wood. She wraps them in a square of rough cloth and ties it tight, testing the knot twice. The purse of coins she takes last, prying up the floorboard with the tip of her knife. The note lies where she left it, its edges curled slightly from the dampness of the wood beneath. She hesitates, holding it between her fingers. It would be easier to leave it here, to pretend she never saw it, never touched it. But something in her refuses to abandon it to be found by someone else. She folds it small and tucks it deep into the purse, beneath the coins.
When she is ready, she sits for a moment in the dim light, listening. The tavern below is almost still now, the keeper moving about with slow, deliberate steps as he clears the tables. The rain begins, a soft patter against the shutters, and she takes it as a sign. The streets will be quieter in the wet, and quieter is what she needs. She lifts her bundle, slings the purse over her shoulder, and opens the door. The hallway smells of smoke and damp wool, the air cooler than her room. She moves quietly down the stairs, keeping to the edges where the boards are less likely to creak. The keeper glances up as she passes the doorway to the main room, but she does not slow, and he does not call out. Perhaps he guesses where she is going. Perhaps he simply knows better than to ask. Outside, the street glistens under the lamplight, rain pooling in the uneven stones. She pulls her shawl tight and keeps her head down, letting the water hide her face. The harbour is not her destination. It will be watched too closely now. Instead, she heads toward the narrow lanes near the old city wall, where the buildings lean over the streets and strangers are less likely to be noticed. She is halfway there when she hears it, the faint rhythm of footsteps that match her own, too closely to be chance. She keeps walking, her pace steady, resisting the urge to look over her shoulder. The rain softens the sounds, but not enough to disguise the presence behind her. At the next corner, she turns sharply, stepping into a narrow passage that runs between two crumbling warehouses. The air here smells of wet stone and rotting wood, the walls close enough that she can touch both with outstretched hands. The footsteps quicken. She glances back and sees him. A man in a dark hood, his face shadowed, moving with the easy certainty of someone who has been following her for more than a few streets. She stops, turning to face him before he can speak. "What do you want?" she asks, her voice sharper than she intended. He pauses a few steps away, the rain dripping from the edge of his hood. When he speaks, his voice is calm, almost pleasant. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "I'm leaving," she says. "That's all you need to know." He tilts his head slightly as if studying her. "Leaving won't help you. They'll still find you. And when they do, they'll ask what you did with the coin." Her hand tightens around the bundle she carries. "You're one of them?" "I'm not with them," he says. And though she wants to doubt him, there is no certainty in his voice that marks a lie. "I'm here to tell you that if you want to live, you'll stop running blind. Come with me." She shakes her head, stepping back toward the far end of the passage. "I don't follow men I don't know." "Then you'll follow them instead," he says, and the way he says it makes her skin crawl. Before she can answer, a new set of footsteps echoes from the mouth of the passage she had entered. The man in the hood glances that way, then back at her. "Decide now," he says, and takes a step closer. The rain falls harder, filling the silence between them, and she realizes the choice she makes in the next breath may decide whether she ever sees another dawn. She does not want to move toward him. Every instinct tells her to keep her distance, yet the footsteps from the other end of the passage are growing louder, more deliberate, and she knows what it means. Whoever is coming has no reason to hide their approach, which means they believe she has nowhere to go. She glances between the hooded man and the shadowed figures forming at the far mouth of the alley. There are two of them, broad-shouldered and slow, their shapes swelling larger with each step. The hooded man takes another pace toward her, stopping just outside the reach of her arm. Rain runs down his cloak, dripping from his hands. "You have seconds," he says quietly. "Choose wrong, and they'll have you before you even open your mouth to lie to them." The two at the far end pause, as if deciding whether to rush or advance with measured steps. She recognizes the taller one. He had been in the tavern 2 nights ago, drinking alone, but watching every movement in the room. The memory of his eyes on her then, half hidden beneath the brim of his hat, makes her skin tighten now. She makes her decision. Without another word, she moves toward the hooded man. He turns sharply, leading her down a narrow cut in the wall that she would have missed entirely in the dark. The passage bends once, twice, the walls so close that her shoulder brushes damp stone. Behind them, the sound of boots splashing through water follows, faster now. The hooded man pushes open a warped door and ushers her through. They emerge into a courtyard hemmed in by leaning buildings, their upper floors jutting over the ground like crooked teeth. A single lantern burns in one window, throwing a dim circle of light across the wet cobblestones. He moves quickly toward a side door beneath a sagging balcony, and she follows, her breath sharp in her chest. Inside, the air is warmer, thick with the smell of damp wood and the faint tang of smoke. He leads her up a set of narrow stairs, each step groaning under their weight, until they reach a small room at the top. The only light comes from a low fire in the hearth, its glow catching on the edges of a battered table and 2 mismatched chairs. He closes the door behind them and pulls back his hood. His face is younger than she expected, the lines at the corners of his eyes more from sleeplessness than age. His hair is dark, damp from the rain, and his eyes are quick and steady as they search hers. "You were right not to stay in that room," he says, his voice still low, but less urgent now. "The bounty's drawn more than just the watch. They'll take you whether you've helped him or not, because the purse for delivering you is just as heavy." She sets her bundle down on the table, her fingers stiff. "And you?" she asks. "Why should I think you're not one of them?" He leans against the wall, arms crossed. "Because if I were, you'd already be bound and halfway to whoever's paying." It is not a full answer, but there is truth in it. She studies him for a long moment, searching for signs of deception, but finds only the tired watchfulness of someone who has been running as long as she has, perhaps longer. He asks if she still has the coin. She hesitates, then nods. His mouth tightens, but he does not ask to see it. Instead, he says, "They think it's payment. It's not. It's proof. And if you have it, you're part of this, whether you meant to be or not." The words settle heavy between them. She thinks of the note folded beneath the coins, the brief message that had been both warning and tether. She asks what exactly the proof is for, but he only shakes his head. "Not here, not yet. Too many ears in these walls." They stand in silence for a while, the rain ticking against the small window. Somewhere below, a door slams and a voice calls out, though the words are muffled. He moves to the hearth, adding a piece of wood to the fire, then looks back at her. "You can leave now. Take your chances in the street. Or you can stay until the morning, and I'll get you out of this quarter without them seeing you." She knows he is offering no promises beyond that. But the memory of the 2 men closing in through the rain is still fresh, and the thought of stepping back into the open night makes her feel suddenly cold. She nods once. "I'll stay." His expression does not change, but something in his shoulders eases. He gestures toward the second chair. "Then sit and listen. There are things you need to know before daylight comes." She lowers herself into the chair, the wood cool and unsteady beneath her, and watches him as he crouches near the fire. The small flames reflect in his eyes, catching there like glints of something sharp. For a moment he says nothing, only holds his hands out toward the heat, as if deciding where to begin. The quiet in the room is broken only by the faint hiss of rain against the window and the crackle of sap in the wood. "You've heard the talk," he says at last. That the man they're hunting killed someone important. He leans back, resting one hand on the hearthstone. That much is true. But the rest of what they're saying, the whispers about how it happened, why it happened, they've twisted it to fit the story they need people to believe. She sits forward slightly, her elbows on her knees, waiting for him to go on. The one who died wasn't some helpless noble or merchant, he continues. He was a man who wore the right seals, spoke the right words in the right halls, but made his fortune in ways the law doesn't write down. He had enemies in every corner of the city, but none who dared move against him. Not until your stranger did. Her pulse quickens at the way he says, "Your stranger," as if the man's brief time in her room has bound them together in a way she did not choose. The killing wasn't a brawl, and it wasn't for coin, he says. It was a warning, and the stranger didn't act alone. He was sent. The coin he gave you, that's not payment for your time. It's marked. Anyone who knows how to read the markings will know it came from that man's house, from his private stores, which means you're holding the one thing that ties the killer directly to the body. She feels her stomach tighten. The purse in her bundle suddenly feels heavier, more dangerous than it ever did before. "So I've been sitting on proof without even knowing it," she says quietly. "Yes," he answers, "and that's why the bounty isn't just for him anymore. They want the coin. Without it, they can't prove who ordered the killing. With it, they can put a noose around the right neck and call it justice." He pauses, his eyes steady on hers. "The trouble is, justice in this city is only for those who can pay for it." She leans back, the chair creaking under her weight, and stares into the fire. The stranger's message comes back to her in sharp fragments. Keep the coin, say nothing. At the time, it had seemed simple enough. Now she sees it for what it was. Not a request, but a demand to guard the one thing that might keep him alive or damn him entirely. "What happens if they get it?" she asks. "They'll put it in front of the magistrates, the ones who owe their seats to the man who died. They'll hang your stranger before the month is out, and if they think you gave it to him willingly, they'll make sure you vanish in the same night." The weight of it presses on her. Not just the danger, but the choice that comes with it. She could hand the coin over and end her part in this. She could drop it in the river and let it sink to the mud, taking the truth with it. Or she could keep it, and in doing so keep herself at the center of something that is growing darker with each passing day. The hooded man stands, brushing his hands on his cloak. "I can get you out of the quarter at first light. After that, it's your decision where to go, but if you keep the coin, you'll need to keep moving. They won't stop looking." She studies him, searching for the reason he is helping her. "Why tell me all this?" "Because the man you met didn't choose you by accident," he says. "And because if you're going to carry something that dangerous, you should at least know the shape of the blade you're holding." The fire shifts, sending a brief flare of light across his face before settling back into its low burn. Outside, the rain eases to a thin drizzle, the sound like whispers against the window glass. She feels the knot in her stomach tighten, but somewhere beneath it is a flicker of resolve she did not expect. She has been running without knowing the rules of the game. Now she knows, and the knowledge feels as heavy and sharp as the coin hidden in her bundle. The question is not whether she can survive this, it is whether she can live with the choice she makes when the next hand reaches for what she carries. The light that seeps through the small window is pale and thin, the kind that makes the world outside look washed clean, but still cold. She has not slept, only sat in the chair with her shawl pulled tight, listening to the fire sink into embers. The hooded man moves quietly around the room, gathering a few things from a small chest in the corner. He works with the ease of someone who has done this many times before, each movement deliberate and without waste. When he finally speaks, his voice is low but firm. "We leave in a few minutes. The streets will be quietest now, but not for long. Once the markets start to stir, too many eyes will be open." She nods, reaching for her bundle. The purse with the coin and the note feels heavier than it did yesterday, as if the truth he shared has added weight to it. She tucks it deep inside her things, tying the knot tighter, and then rises. They slip out into the damp courtyard, the air holding the faint scent of smoke and rain. A thin mist clings to the cobblestones, softening the shapes of the leaning buildings. The hooded man leads the way, his stride brisk but measured, never hurried enough to draw attention. They move through narrow lanes where the light barely reaches, passing shuttered windows and doorways that hold only shadows. The city feels different at this hour. Without the press of voices and the clash of carts, the silence makes each footstep sound louder than it should. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls once, the note hanging in the air before fading. He takes them along routes she doesn't know, slipping through gaps between warehouses, crossing small courtyards that seem forgotten by the main streets. Once, he pauses at a corner, peering around it before gesturing for her to follow. She catches sight of two men leaning against a wall farther down, their heads close together in quiet talk. One of them glances up, scanning the street, and she feels her chest tighten until they are well past. They reach a section of the old city wall, where a narrow gate stands half hidden behind a cluster of storage sheds. The gate is locked, but the hooded man produces a small iron tool and works it into the rusted latch with practiced hands. The lock gives after a moment's resistance, the sound barely more than a click. He pushes the gate open just wide enough for them to slip through. Beyond the wall, the streets widen slightly, the buildings newer and less crowded. The air feels fresher here, though it carries the faint tang of the river. He keeps them close to the edges, moving through the shadowed side of the lanes. She realizes he is steering them toward the southern edge of the quarter, where the roads lead into districts she has never had reason to visit. At one turn, he suddenly draws her back into a recessed doorway. A patrol of 3 men walks past, their boots striking the cobblestones in perfect rhythm. They carry short swords at their belts and wear the dark leather of private enforcers rather than the city watch. She does not breathe until they have passed from sight. When they move on, his voice is little more than a whisper. They're widening the search already. By midday, they'll be posted at the main gates. They continue, and soon the streets begin to wake. A few shutters open, spilling warm light onto the damp stones. A cart rattles past, its driver too busy, urging the mule forward to pay them any mind. The sound of a distant market drifts on the air, a low hum of voices, the clink of metal, the occasional call of a vendor. He slows as they approach a narrow bridge, spanning a sluggish canal. The water below is dark and still, broken only by the faint ripple of something unseen. On the other side, the streets widen again, and the crowd will be harder to avoid. "This is as far as I take you," he says quietly. "Once you cross, you'll be out of the quarter. They'll still be looking, but fewer will know your face." She looks at him, searching for something to say. He has given her more than she expected, answers, a way out, and perhaps more protection than she deserves. "Why?" she asks simply. He meets her eyes for a moment, then glances towards the far side of the bridge. "Because he asked me to, and because keeping you alive might keep the coin where it needs to be." She nods once, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bundle. Without another word, she steps onto the bridge, the mist curling around her ankles. Each step feels like it carries her farther from the life she knew, though she has no idea what waits on the other side. Halfway across, she glances back. He is gone, swallowed by the mist and the twisting lanes behind the wall. Ahead, the city opens in ways she has never walked before, and she realizes that whatever comes next will be hers to decide, unless, of course, they find her first. The air on the far side of the bridge feels different, sharper, carrying the scent of tar from the shipyards and the faint sweetness of baking bread from somewhere deep in the tangle of streets ahead. She keeps her head down, letting the mist cling to her hair and shawl, using it as a kind of disguise. Here, the buildings are broader, the walls cleaner, and the streets carry more space between them. Yet the unfamiliarity makes her uneasy. In her own quarter, she knew which corners to avoid, which faces were likely to look away. Here, every doorway is a question she cannot answer. The morning is gathering pace, the market's hum grows louder, and the streets begin to thicken with people. Dock workers tramp past in pairs, their boots leaving wet prints on the stones. A woman with a basket of apples calls out her price to anyone who glances her way. A boy runs by carrying a bundle of firewood twice his size. She tries to fold herself into this current, moving with it rather than against it, hoping her bundle and worn clothes will make her nothing more than another shadow among many. She chooses her turns at random, taking the narrower lanes where the noise fades and the light struggles to follow. The walls here are close and streaked with damp, and puddles reflect the pale sky in broken shapes. She is beginning to think she might have found a path that will carry her deeper into safety when a voice calls her name. It is not loud, not enough to draw attention from the passers-by, but it freezes her all the same. She turns her head slightly, just enough to see a figure leaning in the shadow of a doorway. He is tall, his cloak unmarked by the damp air, and his eyes are fixed entirely on her. The sight of him sends a small jolt through her. The recognition is immediate, though she has never spoken to him. He was there the night the stranger came, sitting in the darkest corner of the tavern, pretending to drink. Her first thought is to walk on, to pretend she hasn't heard, but he steps from the doorway, moving into her path before she can pass. His smile is slight, almost polite, but there is no warmth in it. "You walk quickly for someone who claims to have nothing to hide," he says. "I don't know you," she answers, her voice flat. "No," he says, "but you know him." And that's enough. His eyes drop for a moment to the bundle in her arms. "Carrying something for him, are you?" Her fingers tighten on the cloth, but she forces herself to keep still. "I'm carrying my life, same as anyone who's leaving a place they're done with." His smile fades. "That life will be shorter than you think if you keep protecting him. I can make sure it's longer." He glances toward a nearby alley, a subtle tilt of his head. "We should talk where it's quieter." The way he says talk makes it sound like something she will not walk away from. Her pulse beats in her ears and she can feel the weight of the purse through the cloth of her bundle. She knows that if she follows him, she will be putting herself entirely in his hands. Yet refusing him here, in the open street, might draw the wrong eyes. She looks past him, scanning the street for an escape. The crowd has thinned, the market-goers having turned down toward the square. The alley he indicated is narrow but not empty. She catches the faint movement of someone further back in its shadows. Whoever they are waiting. He steps closer, close enough that she can smell the faint spice of his breath. "You're in over your head. Hand it over now, and I'll forget I saw you." She forces a small shake of her head. "I think I'll keep walking." Something in his gaze changes, the politeness dropping away to something sharper. He reaches for her arm, but she twists back, slipping around him into the street. Her feet strike the stones harder than she intends, and she does not look back to see if he follows. She takes the first turning she finds, then another, letting instinct guide her deeper into the maze. Her breath comes fast, her bundle clutched tight against her. She knows she has not shaken him, not entirely. Men like that don't let go of what they've marked. She has only bought herself a little time, and she can already feel it slipping. Somewhere in this district, the trap is still waiting, and she may already be walking straight toward it. The lane she has taken narrows sharply, the walls pressing in until the sky above is only a thin grey ribbon. Her footsteps echo louder than she would like, bouncing off the damp stone, carrying forward and back as though the sound is hunting her. She forces herself not to break into a run. Running will make her easier to follow, easier to spot if there are eyes ahead. Still, the urge to quicken her pace builds with every step, and she keeps glancing over her shoulder, searching the mist for a shadow that moves where it shouldn't. She reaches a junction where 3 lanes meet, their mouths yawning open like choices she has no time to weigh. To the left, the sound of the market drifts faintly, the hum of voices and the clink of metal against wood. To the right, the lane dips toward the river, a faint glimmer of water visible between the leaning buildings. Straight ahead, the path is darker, vanishing into a tangle of crooked timber and sagging roots. She chooses the river. It feels like a direction that could lead her out, toward open ground, and away from the twisting streets where pursuit can corner her. The air grows cooler as she descends, the smell of the water growing stronger, carrying the tang of mud and rotting rope. Halfway down the slope, she hears it. The quick patter of footsteps behind her, too light to be the slow plod of a market-goer, too certain to be a coincidence. She does not turn at first, only listens, and the sound falls into the same rhythm as her own. When she finally glances back, she catches sight of a shape rounding the corner above, the
hem of a dark cloak flicking in the air before disappearing again. The certainty hits her hard. The man from the doorway has not given up, and now he is closer. She quickens her pace, but the slope works against her. The stones are slick, and the weight of her bundle threatens to unbalance her. At the foot of the slope, the lane opens onto a narrow quay where the river laps lazily against the moorings. A few small boats are tied up, their hulls dark with waterlines, the ropes thick with algae. The quay is nearly empty. Only an old fisherman sits hunched beside a net, mending it with slow, practiced movements. He glances up at her briefly, then returns to his work as if nothing in her hurried approach concerns him. She moves past him, scanning for another way forward. A narrow archway leads under a warehouse, its bricks blackened with age. She slips into it, her footsteps muffled now, the river sound dimmer. But as she emerges on the far side, she realizes her mistake. The space here is a dead end, hemmed in by the high wall of the warehouse on one side and the water on the other. Only a thin wooden jetty juts out into the river, slick with moss and sagging under its own weight. The footsteps are closer now, the sound bouncing in the archway. She backs toward the jetty, her eyes darting for another escape, but there is none. The only way forward is the water, dark and slow, its surface broken by drifting debris. She thinks of jumping, but the weight of her bundle, the cold bite of the river, and the uncertainty of the current all root her in place. He appears in the mouth of the archway, his cloak hanging open now, revealing a short sword at his side. His smile has returned, though it is sharper than before. "You've made this easier than I thought," he says, stepping into the space with a measured pace. Her grip tightens on the bundle. If you're going to kill me, get on with it, she says, though her voice is steadier than she feels. He tilts his head. Kill you? Number, I just want what you're carrying. Give it to me and you can walk away. She glances at the river, then back at him. And if I don't? Then you'll leave here lighter, he says, and takes another step forward. The fisherman's voice cuts through the air, low and rough. She said no. Both of them turn to see him standing at the edge of the quay, a gaff hook in his hands. His eyes are narrow, his grip steady. For a moment, the man with the sword hesitates, weighing the risk. The fisherman does not move, does not lower the hook, and the silence between them tightens like a rope. The man's smile fades entirely. Without a word, he steps back into the archway, the sound of his boots retreating up the slope. Only when the footsteps have vanished does the fisherman lower the hook and turn back to his net. She stands there, her breath uneven, unsure whether to thank him or to leave before the quiet shifts again. The river laps softly at the jetty, the
mist curling low over the water, and she knows she has only been spared for the moment. The hunt is still on, and she is still carrying the prize. The fisherman does not look up from his net when he speaks again. His fingers move with slow precision, threading twine through the torn section, tightening it before looping the next knot. You keep standing there like a post, he says. You'll draw the wrong eyes again. Come here. She hesitates, watching him. He does not seem to care whether she obeys or not, but something in his tone carries the quiet authority of someone used to being listened to. She steps toward him, the damp boards of the quay flexing under her weight. When she reaches him, he sets the net aside and finally meets her eyes. His face is lined from years in the weather, his skin as worn as the ropes coiled at his feet. "They're not done with you," he says simply. "Men like that don't let go, and you're walking in streets where every door has someone willing to sell what they see." "I noticed," she answers, her voice low. He nods, as though her reply confirms what he already knew. "You've got something they want. I don't need to know what it is. But if you keep moving the way you have been, you won't make it past nightfall." She shifts her bundle, unsure if she should admit just how right he is. "So, what are you suggesting?" His gaze flicks toward the dark water. "There's a place upriver, small. No one goes there unless they have to. The channels are too shallow for the big boats, and the paths along the bank are choked with willow and reed. You follow me, I'll take you there. They won't think to look, at least not right away." She studies him, searching for any sign of deception. "And why would you help me?" The corner of his mouth lifts faintly, though not quite into a smile. "Because I don't like men with swords thinking the river belongs to them. And because you look like you know how to keep your mouth shut. It is not a promise of safety, but it is more than she has been offered by anyone except the hooded man." She glances back toward the lane, expecting to see the dark cloak reappear in the mist, then nods. "Fine, I'll follow." He rises, his movement steady despite the stiffness of age. From a post near the quay, he takes a long pole, its tip worn smooth from years of pushing against the riverbed. He gestures for her to follow him down the narrow steps to a small boat, tied in the shadows. The hull is patched in places, the wood weathered to a silvery grey, but it floats solid and still. She steps in carefully, her bundle clutched tight, and settles on the narrow bench. The fisherman unties the rope with quick, practiced motions, then pushes them away from the quay with the pole. The boat glides into the slow current, the water parting in ripples beneath them. The city looks different from the river. The buildings rise like sheer cliffs on either side, their lower stones slick with algae, their upper windows shuttered against the damp air. The noises of the market and the streets fade quickly, replaced by the creak of wood and the gentle slap of water against the hull. Mist curls low over the surface, wrapping them in shifting veils. They pass under a bridge, the sound of footsteps above muted and distant. She leans slightly to look up at its underside, where moss and lichen cling in green patches. The fisherman keeps them close to the bank, guiding the boat through pockets of shadow. Now and then, he pauses to listen, his head tilted toward the sounds of the city beyond the walls. After a time, the buildings begin to thin, replaced by stretches of stone embankment where weeds grow between the cracks. Farther on, the walls give way to tangled willows that dip their branches into the water. The air smells of wet leaves and mud, and the only sound is the slow sweep of the pole against the riverbed. She realizes she has not seen another soul since they left the quay. "How much farther?" she asks. "Far enough," he says without looking at her. "There's an old boathouse ahead, belonged to a merchant family once, but no one's used it in years. Roof's half gone, but the walls stand. You can stay there a night or two while they search the wrong streets." She wonders if she should trust the shelter he is offering. A boathouse could be safety, or it could be a perfect place for someone to trap her. Yet when she glances back at the path they have taken, she knows there is no turning without passing through danger again. The mist thickens, muffling the light, and soon the outline of the boathouse emerges from the shadows. Its timbers are warped, the paint long stripped away by wind and water, but it sits solid at the edge of the bank, half hidden by the sweep of willows. The fisherman steers them toward it with the ease of someone who has done so many times before. As the boat slides against the worn dock, he turns to her. "You can light no fire here, and you keep to the shadows even inside. If anyone sees you, they'll start asking why." She nods, stepping carefully onto the dock. The boards creak under her weight, but hold. The boathouse door hangs slightly open, the darkness inside deep and still. She hesitates at the threshold, listening to the slow lap of the water behind her, and realizes that for the first time since leaving her room, no footsteps follow. But she also knows this quiet will not last. Inside, the air smells of damp wood and river silt. The walls are lined with shelves that once held coils of rope, jars of tar, and stacks of folded sailcloth, but most are empty now, their wood warped and splintering. A long workbench runs along one side, its surface scattered with rusted nails, fragments of rope, and the brittle remains of a rat's nest. In the far corner, an upturned boat leans against the wall, its ribs exposed like the bones of something long dead. She moves, slowly, testing the boards beneath her feet, listening for creaks that might betray her presence outside. The fisherman is already gone. She did not hear his boat leave, but when she looks back through the open doorway, the dock is empty, the mist closing in where he had been. She sets her bundle down on the workbench and pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The damp air clings to her skin, seeping into her bones, and she wishes for the fire she cannot risk lighting. The light fades quickly, the mist turning the day to a dull grey before sinking into darkness. She sits on the floor with her back to the wall, the bundle close at her side, and forces herself to eat a small piece of bread from her bag. The water outside laps softly against the dock, its rhythm slow and steady, and for a time she lets herself think that perhaps she will pass the night without trouble. It is the faint scrape of wood against wood that breaks the quiet. At first, she thinks it might be the wind shifting the dock, but then it comes again, slower, deliberate. She freezes, her eyes fixed on the doorway, though the mist beyond is too thick to see through. The sound grows clearer, the creak of a boat settling, the dull thud of something striking the dock, and then the almost silent splash of a pole lifted from the water. She moves silently to the corner beside the door, crouching low, her fingers wrapping around the small knife hidden in her bundle. Her breath is slow, each inhalation held for a moment before release. A figure steps into the doorway, tall, wrapped in a long coat, the hood low over his face. He pauses, letting his eyes adjust to the gloom, and then he speaks in a voice she knows immediately is not one of the men who have been hunting her. "He told me to find you." Her grip on the knife loosens slightly, but she does not move. "Who?" she asks, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The man you hid," the stranger says, stepping fully inside. The light from the mist falls across his face, revealing a lean jaw, unshaven, with eyes that flick constantly between the corners of the room. "He's alive, for now, but not for long if you stay here." She straightens slowly, though her weight stays ready to shift if she needs to run. "And you?" "I'm not here for the coin," he says quickly, as if anticipating her suspicion. "I'm here because he can't move without drawing them straight to him. You can." The words coil in her mind, their meaning sharp and uncomfortable. "You want me to carry something for him?" His gaze holds hers for a moment, before dropping to the bundle at her side. "You already are. But you don't know where it needs to go." She feels the weight of the purse again, heavier now that its purpose is being named. "And where is that?" "There's a house beyond the eastern gate. Looks abandoned, but the cellar's still used. You take it there, you leave it on the table, and you walk away without looking back. That's all." "And if I don't?" she asks. He doesn't answer at once. Instead, he moves toward the upturned boat in the corner, crouching briefly to check the shadows beneath it. "If you don't, they'll take it from you, and the next time you see him, it will be his body hanging in the square." She studies him, trying to decide whether the urgency in his voice is real or a tool to push her into moving. The boathouse feels smaller with him in it, the walls closing in with every word he speaks. Outside, the water shifts against the dock, and she realizes that if he came by boat, he could leave as quickly as he arrived and take with him the only link she has to the man who started all of this. "I'll think about it," she says at last. He shakes his head, stepping back toward the doorway. "You don't have that kind of time, dawn or not at all." Then he is gone, swallowed by the mist, leaving the door open to the sound of the river. She stands there for a long time, her knife still in her hand, staring at the space where he had been. The bundle at her side feels like a heartbeat now, steady and insistent, reminding her that every moment she waits, the net tightens a little more. The hours after his departure are the longest she can remember. She does not sleep. Instead, she sits in the dark with her back against the wall, listening to the slow lap of the river and the occasional groan of the boathouse timbers. The air inside grows colder as the night thins, seeping into her fingers and toes until they ache. The mist outside presses against the doorway like a living thing, shifting and curling, always ready to swallow whatever steps into it. She turns the stranger's words over in her mind. A house beyond the eastern gate, a cellar still in use, leave it on the table and walk away. It sounds simple enough when spoken aloud, but she knows the streets between here and there will not be empty, and the gate itself will be watched. The purse in her bundle seems to hum with danger now, as though every person who wants it can feel its pull even across the city. Twice during the night she hears movement on the water, the faint dip of an oar and the creak of wood. Both times she stills her breathing, gripping the knife until the sound fades. The fisherman had been right. This is not a place to stay for long. When the first hint of dawn shows itself, a pale widening of the mist at the doorway, she rises. Her legs feel stiff, her body heavy from the stillness, but her mind is set. Staying means waiting for them to find her, and she cannot spend another day boxed in by damp walls. She tightens the bundle, tucking the purse deep inside, then slings it over her shoulder. Outside, the mist is thicker than before, but the world is brighter within it. The dock is slick beneath her boots, the boards glistening with beads of water. She pauses at the edge, looking down at the slow current. There is no sign of the fisherman's boat, no movement except the drifting of leaves along the surface. She decides against taking the boat left behind in the shadows. Rowing upriver would make her visible to anyone watching the banks, and she does not know the currents well enough to trust them. Instead, she turns inland, finding a narrow path that winds away from the water into the shelter of the willows. The ground here is soft, muffling her steps, and the trees hang low, hiding her from view. Birds call softly from somewhere in the branches, their voices muted by the fog. She follows the path until it merges with a wider track paved in uneven stones. This, she knows, will lead her back toward the edges of the city. The mist hides most of the world around her, revealing only a few paces ahead at a time. Shapes emerge and vanish. A crumbling wall, a pile of broken crates, a doorway set deep into the side of a warehouse. Now and then she passes someone else on the road, their features blurred by the fog, their eyes sliding past her without interest. Still she keeps her head down, her pace steady but not hurried. As the track narrows again, the ground rising beneath her feet, she begins to hear the faint clatter of hooves and the distant murmur of voices. She knows without seeing it that she is approaching the eastern gate. Her stomach knots. Even in fog like this, a lone woman carrying a bundle will draw more attention than she wants. She stops in the shelter of an archway, listening. The voices grow clearer. A handful of guards, perhaps, or traders, waiting for the gate to open fully with the daylight. She wonders if the man from the boathouse has already gone ahead to make certain she is seen. The thought quickens her pulse. The stranger's instructions had been clear, but he had not told her how to pass the gate without being stopped. She considers turning back, circling the city to find another way out, but every moment wasted is a moment closer to being found. She adjusts the shawl over her head, making it shadow her face, and steps back onto the track. The mist thins slightly as she nears the gate, revealing two figures standing beside the road. They do not wear the uniform of the watch. Their cloaks are travel-worn, but the way they stand, alert, scanning each person who approaches, tells her they are looking for someone. She lowers her gaze, moving closer to a cart piled with sacks so that it shields her from their view. Her heartbeat thunders in her ears as she slips past the edge of their sight. The road widens beyond the gate, opening into the low, huddled buildings of the outer district. Somewhere in those streets is the house the stranger spoke of, the cellar where she is meant to leave the purse and walk away. She has no address, no map, only the knowledge that once she steps too far into these lanes, there will be no turning back without crossing that gate again. She keeps walking, letting the crowd pull her forward, every sense straining for the
solitude have changed me into someone who's less than human. Perhaps I am the White Witch of the Alps after all.
he wears is not. It is the kind of smile she has seen in taverns when someone believes They have just won a game. "You've saved me some trouble," he says, his voice easy, almost friendly. "I'd heard you might be carrying something worth having." Her fingers close around the purse. "This is not yours." He shrugs, stepping closer. "It doesn't matter whose it is. It only matters who can keep it." His eyes flick to the stairs and she realizes there is more than one set of footsteps in the room now. A second man emerges from the shadows behind her, blocking the way out. She glances between them, her mind racing. The table, the cellar, the ease with which she found it, it all falls into place. She was meant to come here. The man at the boathouse had not been helping her. He had been guiding her into a corner where they could take what they wanted without risk of being seen. The first man tilts his head. "Hand it over, and we'll let you walk out of here with all your teeth." Her heart hammers in her chest. She knows that giving them the purse will end her part in this, but it will also end the stranger's. Keeping it might end hers just as quickly. The second man shifts his weight, a small movement that makes the space between them feel even smaller. She realizes she is going to have to move first if she wants any chance at all. The cellar holds its breath, waiting for her choice. The dim light in the cellar shifts with the faint flicker of movement, casting long shadows that dance across the cracked stone walls. Her heart pounds louder than the soft drip of water echoing somewhere in the depths. The two men close in, their smiles thin and cold, confident that they have cornered her. But she feels something harden inside, a quiet flame sparked by desperation and the sharp edge of survival. The purse in her hands is no longer just leather and coin. It is the fragile tether to a truth far larger than herself, and she will not surrender it without a fight. Her eyes flick quickly between the men, catching the slight twitch of a blade beneath one cloak and the eager gleam in the other's gaze. In a swift motion, born from years of shadowed streets and whispered warnings, she steps back, letting her body press against the cool stone. She pulls the knife from her bundle, its small, curved blade catching what little light filters through the cellar window. The men hesitate, the confidence in their steps faltering for the briefest of moments. "I'm not the easy target you think," she says, voice steady despite the rapid thrum of adrenaline. The purse remains clutched tightly in one hand, the knife ready in the other. The first man lunges, aiming to snatch the purse, but she ducks under his reach and slashes at his arm. The blade bites through fabric. A sharp sting of pain follows, and he staggers back with a curse. The second man reacts immediately, stepping forward with a harsh shout, but she sidesteps, knocking a loose crate between them. The space contracts, tension threading every breath. She knows she can't hold them off forever, but her sudden resistance has bought her a precious moment. Her mind races, calculating her next move. The cellar door behind her is the only exit, but the stairs are narrow and winding, not suited for a quick escape with pursuers so close. Yet the sharp scent of oil and metal lingers in the air, hinting at hidden corners and forgotten recesses. She glances to the far wall and sees a narrow gap behind a stack of crates. It's just enough for someone small and quick. Without hesitation, she pivots, weaving past the men and lunging toward the gap. The purse bounces against her side as she squeezes through, scraping her shoulder on rough wood. She stumbles into a cramped space, heart hammering in her ears, the knife still ready. She presses herself flat against the cool wall, breath shallow and rapid, listening to the men curse and swear as they realize she has slipped away. The cellar becomes a maze of shadows, the silence heavier now, broken only by distant footsteps as the men spread out to search. She moves slowly, every sound sharp in her ears, every breath measured not to betray her. The weight of the purse is a reminder that she holds more than just coins. She carries a secret that could topple lives and change the course of power in the city. Fear twists with determination in her chest. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours as she creeps toward the stairs at the far end of the hidden passage. The muffled voices above grow more distant, giving her hope that the men's search is growing disorganized. She pauses once more, gathering strength, then begins her ascent, careful not to make a sound. When she reaches the top, the light from the main cellar room spills faintly through a crack in the door. With a deep breath, she pushes it open just enough to slip through and closes it softly behind her. The air feels lighter here, less charged with menace, but the knowledge of the chase still clings to her skin. She wastes no time, moving quickly toward the street, her steps purposeful now, fueled by a new resolve. The trap had been set, but she has turned it. The purse remains with her, a symbol of a dangerous truth and a burden she cannot shed. Yet in holding it, she claims her place in this story, not as prey, but as someone who refuses to be silenced. Outside, the city awaits, sprawling and unpredictable, full of shadow and light, promise and peril. Her journey is far from over. But as the first pale rays of dawn stretch across the sky, she knows she is no longer running blindly. She has taken a step forward, and whatever comes next, she will meet it on her own terms. The streets seem quieter now as the first light of dawn filters through the narrow alleys, casting long, soft shadows that stretch and recede like ghosts. She moves with measured steps, the weight of the purse still pressing against her side, a constant reminder of the choice she has made and the danger it carries. The city feels different at this hour, less hostile, but no less uncertain. The fog that clung so tightly the night before has begun to lift, revealing familiar shapes and worn faces already stirring to life. Yet she knows that each friendly glance could hide suspicion, and every passerby might be a hunter in disguise. Her thoughts drift to the stranger's words about allies and enemies. She has trusted too few in her life, and every trust has been a fragile thing, balanced on the edge of necessity and risk. Now, with the coin's secret tied to her survival, the stakes have grown heavier. She can't afford mistakes. The question that presses hardest is not just who to trust, but how to recognize a friend in a city built on secrets and shadows. As she rounds a corner, a soft voice breaks through the quiet. You move like someone carrying a burden much heavier than her bundle. She turns sharply, hand tightening on the strap of her cloth. Standing there is a woman, older than most she has seen in this part of the city, with eyes like weathered stone and a smile that holds a hint of knowing. The woman's clothes are simple but neat, her posture steady and unyielding. There is something about her presence that demands attention without force. I could say the same, she replies cautiously, not yet willing to reveal more than she must. The woman steps closer, lowering her voice. I know what you carry, and I know why the streets seem less safe for you now. Her gaze flickers toward the purse, then back to the girl's face. I've seen what that coin can do, the power it holds, and the enemies it makes. For a moment, silence stretches between them, heavy and fraught. The city's noise returns slowly, the clip of hooves on the stone, the murmur of voices waking from sleep, the distant clang of a bell marking the hour. The woman speaks again, softer this time. I can help you, but only if you are willing to trust someone who has lived too long in the shadows to offer easy promises. The girl studies her carefully. This could be a trap, another web designed to snare her when she lets her guard down. But there is also a lifeline in the woman's words, a chance to find footing in this shifting world. She nods slowly, the weight on her chest easing just a fraction. "Come," the woman says, gesturing toward a narrow passage that leads deeper into the maze of alleys. "There are others who will want to see you safe. But you must move quickly and you must be ready to keep secrets sharper than knives." As they walk, the city awakens fully around them. Merchants begin setting up their stalls, children dart between carts, and the scent of baking bread drifts through the air. Yet beneath this morning bustle lies the undercurrent of danger. Eyes watching, whispers shared in hidden corners, and the ever-present threat of betrayal. The girl's mind races with questions about the coin, the stranger, and the web of forces pulling tighter around her. But for now, she clings to this fragile alliance, knowing that in a city built on secrets, sometimes survival means finding unexpected allies in the most unlikely places. The narrow passage winds deeper into the heart of the district, its walls closing in as they move away from the crowded streets. The air here is cooler, tinged with the scent of damp stone and faint smoke from hidden hearths. The woman leads her without haste, her steps sure and unhesitating despite the twisting alleys and sudden turns. The girl follows, clutching her bundle, the purse pressing against her side like a living thing. Each footfall feels like a step further away from the life she once knew and closer to something uncertain, yet necessary. After a time, the passage opens onto a small courtyard encircled by low buildings, their windows shuttered, but for the soft glow of candlelight spilling through cracks. A fire burns in a large iron brazier, the flames licking upward with a warmth that cuts through the night chill. Around it stand a handful of figures, faces shaded in the flickering light, but eyes bright and watchful. The woman introduces her, simply a nod here, a whispered name there, weaving her presence into the fabric of this hidden circle. The group is varied. Men and women with the worn hands of laborers, the sharp eyes of merchants, and the quiet authority of those who have survived by silence and cunning. Their voices are low, careful, but there is an undercurrent of strength, a sense of purpose that sets them apart from the careless bustle outside these walls. They do not ask how she came, nor do they pry into her past. Instead, they listen as the woman speaks of the coin, the bounty, and the dangerous truth that binds them all. She learns that the stranger she carries ties into a larger web of power struggles where loyalty is bought and sold, and justice is a game played by those with the deepest pockets and sharpest daggers. The coin she holds is not just proof. It is leverage, a key to secrets that could shift alliances and redraw boundaries. The stakes are higher than she had imagined, and the shadows that chase her reach far beyond the streets she knows. For the first time, she feels a flicker of hope, tempered by the weight of caution. These people offer more than refuge, they offer knowledge and connection, tools she will need if she is to survive and perhaps turn the tide. Yet with that knowledge comes the burden of choice, whom to trust, when to speak, and how to wield the power she never sought but now carries. The night stretches on as they speak in hushed tones, planning, sharing fragments of news and warnings. The girl listens, absorbing each word, knowing that the road ahead will demand more than courage. It will demand cunning, patience, and an unyielding will to hold on to the fragile light she has found amid the darkness. As the fire burns low and the first light of dawn begins to touch the horizon, she feels the weight of her journey settle over her. The city outside may still be dangerous, but within these walls she has found allies, and perhaps for the first time a chance at something more than mere survival. The dawn light creeps slowly through the cracks in the wooden shutters, casting long beams that stretch across the floorboards and catch the dust motes floating in the air. She wakes with a quiet determination, the weight of the night's conversations settling around her like a cloak. The faces she saw by the fire linger in her mind, rough, worn, but resolute. And for the first time, she feels a thread of belonging, fragile yet undeniable. She dresses with deliberate care, the worn fabric of her clothes suddenly feeling less like a burden and more like armor. The purse with its secret is still close at hand, a reminder of the choice she made and the path she now walks. The woman who welcomed her the night before appears in the doorway, silent and steady, as if waiting to see whether the new day will bring resolve or retreat. There are no grand speeches or promises made. Instead, a simple nod, a glance heavy with unspoken understanding, and the subtle passing of knowledge. The map of streets to avoid, the names whispered only in trust, the signals of danger hidden in everyday life. She listens, absorbing each detail, knowing that survival here means more than speed or strength. It means knowing when to blend and when to stand out, when to speak and when to stay silent. Stepping out into the awakening city, she feels the pulse of a new life beneath her feet. One woven with shadows and light, danger and hope. The road ahead is uncertain and fraught, but for the first time, she walks it not alone, but with the weight of purpose guiding her steps. The morning light spills softly through the open window, filling the room with a gentle warmth that feels almost foreign after so many nights shadowed by fear. She sits quietly on the wooden bench, her hands resting on the worn fabric of her skirt, feeling the slow rhythm of her own breath settle her. Outside, the city hums with life. Distant calls of merchants, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, the soft murmur of footsteps blending into the waking day. It is a sound both familiar and new, a reminder that life continues beyond the walls that have held her captive for so long. Her gaze drifts to the small purse tucked safely beneath her cloak, the secret it holds no longer just a burden, but a part of her story, a mark of courage, of survival, and of the choices that have shaped her path. She thinks of the strangers and allies who have crossed her way, the silent promises made and kept, and the quiet strength found in the most unexpected places. In this moment, there is no rush, no looming danger pressing in from the shadows. There is only the soft stillness, the steady pulse of the world moving forward, and the gentle knowledge that she has carved a space for herself within it. The road ahead remains uncertain, woven with both light and shadow, but for now, she allows herself to rest in the calm between the storms. As the sun climbs higher, casting long golden beams across the room, she closes her eyes and lets the quiet wash over her. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, but tonight there is peace, fragile, precious, and entirely hers.